Okay, Ani, welcome to Treaty Week and our Treaty Talks with Tomorrow's Leaders. We're so excited to be here, live at White Pines in Bawating, Chimigwech. We have a great lineup of schools here joining us this afternoon. But before we go to that, I'm going to pass it over to Joel for a beautiful opening. Chimigwech.
Hello, Miigwech, Cheryl. Wena bojon and dinaway magani dug, hapichago miigwech bejayeg gikno ama gajig, hapichago miigwech bejayeg mi oma gikno ama widi gomigong. White Pines High School is in a kadeg. Eshkeda shinimiki bene sheens nindago minawa gema Joel Surret is jaganash is in a kazoyan. And daji dana ki mi oma Robinson Huron wa windama gawin is in a kadeg. Kwedash bungi jaganash shiwi majim. So, formal greetings to all of you students. Thank you all for being here with us. We are at White Pines School, and of course, my given name is Joel Surret. My Anishinaabe name is Animakibane Sheens, and I reside, and work right here in the area of Bawating and what we know as the Robinson Huron Wawindamag Gawin. So I say miigwech to you, and on behalf of the ADSB and of course all of our students, we say a big heartfelt gechimigwech to Robinson Huron Wawindamag Gawin for being with us and putting this excellent opportunity together for all of our students. So apachigo miigwech and bizendawiyeg, miego mamanik and wewe tuyen. Thank you all for listening. That is all I have to say.
Miigwech, Joel, much appreciated. And yeah, I'll just take a moment to introduce myself. Cheryl Recollet Dijnakaz, Point Grandin Donjaba, Weequem Kong de Bendogus. Very happy to be here with all of you. I'll just give you a quick rundown of what's going to happen this afternoon. We're going to head over in just a moment to Parry Sound High School with our Gima Adam Pewis and the students over there. At around 1 o'clock, we're going to head over to Manitoulin Island, Nadominissing, to my home community of Weequemcombe with our Gima Ogama Pelche and the students at Wasayaban High School. And then we're going to close it up with all you wonderful students here at White Pines. So Chimigwech for having us in this gorgeous auditorium. So with that, I think, Barrett, we can pass it over to Parry Sound. So Gima Pewis, are you there? So Chief Adam from Shawanaga and his lovely students in Parry Sound. Ani, Chief Adam.
Ani, Cher, can you hear me?
We can. You might need to speak a little bit louder, but we still got you.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, everybody. Gnu Gijik Dishnikash, Shawanaga Domjaba, Megaze Dodem, Ogima Shawanaga. And I'm honored to be here in our, our youth pavilion at the Parry Sound High School. Once upon a time, I used to roam these halls, and we didn't have this option when we were children. And so it's very wonderful to see. I'm glad to see our youth out. I'm glad to see the drum, and certainly good to see our culture in our schools. And we appreciate all the learning that everyone is doing, and all the work that our students are doing on their behalf and as well as on the behalf of our nations. So it's greatly appreciated, and I'm honored to be here in their lodge today. So I guess the purpose of today is to have some of our youth ask some questions of our Ogima, and so fogging up a little bit in the cold today. But anyways, that's what we're here to do, and so we'll start over here. And go ahead.
Ani, Alan Dishnikaaz, Magnawan Donjaba, Anishinaabe, Menkosei Lishindao. Hi. So, Ogama, I was wondering, what's your responsibilities to service other communities around Ontario?
Well, I'm the Ogima of Shawanaga. I sit on various boards and organizations that service other communities. Ultimately, I work with the council to provide advice and make decisions in the best interests of our communities, and to try and rebuild our nation, and to be to help our communities grow and to look after our citizens and our students. And hopefully we're doing a good job. We do the best that we can and try and walk in a good way. Oh, good.
Ani bonjour nim kibenesi avanojan dijnakas migzi dodam envian la dunjaba sego wego kiryongats oswego netwageno. What are you as chief going to do to uphold our traditions?
Pardon me?
What are you as chief going to do to uphold our traditions?
As chief, I go to ceremony, I go to sweat lodge, I go to lodges like this. I'm learning things that I don't know. This September, I participated in a gathering at Bawatang with some of the other chiefs. I honestly support anybody's desire to explore culture and to try and return to our original ways. And what that means to each individual is different. And I try to support each individual in their quest to be culturally balanced moving forward.
Good.
Ani Niganquit Indigenous Cause Wasakshan and Donjaban Gig Dodem. As chief, what is your role to support the youth?
I used to be a youth. I like to think I'm a youth at heart. My belly doesn't tell me that, but anyways, we're at home. We're in the process of building a roof over our rink, which is a little bit of a surprise. That'll come in the spring. But I grew up here, and as I mentioned earlier, this kind of stuff was not available 20, 25 years ago. And so to see the resurgence of our culture through our youth and to see the programs that you young people are building is phenomenal. And so our desire and our drive at the council table is to support our youth wherever we can and however we can, whether it's land-based learning, whether it's school learning, whether it's learning in the lodge.
My name is Sturgeon. I'm 15 years old and I'm happy today. As chief, what are you going to do and what do you do actively to support our Kwewak, our women?
That's a great question. Without our women, all of us wouldn't exist. And certainly a fundamental collection of wisdom and guidance. The way I was raised and the way I was taught is that our grandmothers and our aunties are the ones who really hold our communities together. And so I've always been a believer of that. And so I always make sure that we listen to their voices, make sure that they're included, and try and restore the balance of our communities from what we've learned through the colonial process to a very unbalanced system to try and return us to a way that includes all of us. So our young, our old, our males, our females, and even those that are two-spirited, and so that we include everybody in our processes. And that we've unlearned that over the last 100 years or so, and it's time to encourage that relearning and regrowth. I know there's some very vocal and powerful women in your community, and I have had the honor of working with and knowing them. And we have some very, very outspoken and powerful women in our community as well. And so it's all a balance, and part of the job or part of the work is to restore that balance back to the way it's supposed to be, which is closer to the ways of nature than what we're used to in a colonial setting.
Ani Karlin Dijnakas, Achichak and Dodem, Shanaga and that Wisaksing and Donjuba. As chief, what do you do to support the hunting practices?
That's an interesting question. And the reason I say it's interesting because our community at home in Shawanaga has always been a hunting community. In fact, next week our youth are scheduled to be out through a hunting program that we've been participating in and supporting for a number of years. We have a communal hunting camp. We also have a number of individuals in our community that regularly hunt and fish and harvest and gather. So we support it. It's part of our way of life. It's something that we continue to do and have continued to do for a very, very long time in Shawanaga. And our biggest concern right now is overharvesting and harvesting by individuals who are not from our nations. And so we're concerned about that, and we're concerned about the number of moose and the number of deer. And we really take our position as stewards of the land and stewards of the animals very seriously. And so we will continue to do that, but we will continue to support the process of hunting and fishing and gathering and harvesting as we have done for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Miigwech, that was great. Miigwech for sharing. Jolene, was there any questions online maybe for Chief Paywas? Okay, awesome. Well, there's no more questions coming in online. Adam, do you want to say any closing comments before we jump to Waseabin?
Yeah, okay, sure. I just would like to appreciate the work that's been done on behalf of our citizens, the work that's being done by our young people. It's good to see the fire here and our items when I showed up today, and certainly appreciate all the work that's being done by Wawindamagan and the team there. And I just want to say a big Chimagwich. I want to say Chimagwich to all of you that are here today, and all of us, all of the people that have joined us online to learn and understand what it means to be an Anishinaabe and to understand our treaties as we move forward in Treaty Week. So Chimagwich for having us. Bamapi.
Miigwech, Ogama, and Miigwech for broadcasting from your beautiful learning lodge there and for sharing with us that great song in a beautiful way. And also love to hear all your students speaking the language. I know us here at Robinson Huron, Wawindamagayuan, we're learning our language too, and we're trying to speak fluently, and we have Jessica giving us weekly language lessons. So we will be putting some of those up on our website. But before we head to Waseabin, I just wanted to give a shout out to some of the schools that have been joining us today. So shout out to grade 12 Indigenous Studies at St. Charles in Nuswakamak in Sudbury. Happy that you're here to join us. The grade 11 FNMI Contemporary Voices at Central Algoma in Desbarat. Miigwech, happy you're here. Brunswick House Student Success Class at Chapleau Secondary. Miigwech for joining us. As well as grade 11 Indigenous Studies in Mishipicotton. So lots of communities from our next door treaty area here. So Chimigwech. With that, I think we're gonna cue it up to Waseabin if you guys are ready in Wequemcong. And just to show, Duke, we do have your jersey here. I know I've been promising you for some time, but number 26, Indian Reserve, and there's Ogama Duke. So take it away, Chief Pelche.
Okay, so Miigwech Kinawea. Good afternoon, everyone. All the students of Waseabin High School and all those of you that are out in the World Wide Web, Chimiigwech for joining me. I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the history of Wequemcong and treaty making in this territory. And I'm hoping that will pique your interest in learning a lot more about our history and how we're related to the rest of the Anishinaabe peoples throughout the Great Lakes territory. So I'm going to start there. Nigan Wasa Ganabit Geni Dishnakas, Kondodem, Gemauda Monkey Wequemcong, Miigwech Dish Gain on Dindim, Monkey Bizdagi. So thank you everyone for coming in, all the students, the teachers, and other special guests. And I did bring with me today some of the items that are important to our peoples. I do have our wampum belts here, and I'll tell you a little bit about those during my presentation, as well as I brought a sword that was given to one of our chiefs back in 1815. So it's something that I can talk to you a little bit about a little later. So first of all, I guess Wequemcong, you know about our own history here? Bungie, your teacher's teaching you? No? Jeez. So anyways, we have, in our community here, Wikwemkong, we have 3 separate tribal nations that call this home throughout history. We have the Odawa peoples, the Ojibwe peoples, as well as the Potawatomi peoples. So 3 separate distinct tribes called Manitoulin home. We are the largest First Nation, Anishinaabe First Nation in Ontario. And one of the things that you should know is that you're one of the richest peoples in the Great Lakes territories, one of the richest Anishinaabe peoples. Do you know why? One is we're surrounded by fresh water. And the second most important thing, Anishinaabe thrives here. And I will say this, is that this is where your culture is. This is where all these stories and teachings are embedded. They're within our language. And I would encourage every one of you to, when you go home later today, try and use some of the words at the kitchen table with your mom, your dad, your auntie, uncle, grandparents, your cousins. Even a little bit helps. Then you're going to add an extra word and a few other words. But that's what makes you some of the richest Anishinaabe peoples around, because your language is strong here in our community. And here's a map here of what we call the Dawa territory, where our peoples, where we've traveled to, and what we called our homelands throughout history. And you'll see all the different little lines that are on this map. It identifies a lot of the treaties that have taken place in this territory in the Great Lakes. So there's a number of them, and the ones that I'm gonna talk about are the Niagara Treaty. I'm going to talk about the 1836 Manitoulin Agreement, as well as the 1850 Treaty, which is why we're here today so I'm gonna share my thoughts, my views, the things I've learned about it, and I'm hoping that it'll help you gain some interest in sharing this knowledge and learning more about it, and being able to pass it on to your future generations. So the first thing that we need to consider if we're talking about treaties is one of the things I continue to hear in Wikwemkong is some of the older generations, they may say, well, I'm non-treaty, or I'm treaty. So the question I have to ask them is, well, which treaty are you referring to? A lot of times they'll talk about what they're trying to get out is there's an event that happened in 1862, October the 6th, 1862 in Manitowoc, that our people do not believe was legitimate. We were opposed to that agreement, and we were excluded from participating in that agreement. In fact, our leaders were told that there wasn't going to be an agreement. So they left and they returned back home to tend to their gardens, and they found out the very next day that there was an agreement that happened. To this day, we're still fighting that. We still fight that on a daily basis, and so, but in saying that, we do have to understand where the foundation of treaties comes from in this territory, and it came from events that were happening in the mid-1760s. The French crown had lost the war with the English crown, or British crown, and part of that, their peace agreement, the New World was given up to the British peoples, the British crown. Prior to that, it was the French that were roaming the lake, the woodlands, and trading with our people. They were provided safe passage, they provided goods, presence so that they can remain in the area. But after that war, things changed and the British stopped providing some of these presents. And there was an Odawa chief. Anyone know an Odawa chief who rallied the Anishinaabe peoples in the Great Lakes? Anyone ever hear of this Odawa chief? Famous one. There's a school named after Pontiac, yes. So Pontiac, he wasn't pleased with the new relationship. So what he ended up doing is he asked the leadership for the territory to join him in asking the British people to leave the territory. So they started surrounding forts. They surrounded Fort Detroit, Fort Mackinac, and it was from there that word got back to the British king, that there was discourse, there was angry Anishinaabe peoples in the Great Lakes, led by Pontiac. So what ended up happening in 1763, the king said there's going to be a new way of doing business with the Anishinaabe peoples. And as part of this royal proclamation that he declared is that there was going to be respect for sovereignty for First Nations. He was going to create an alliance. There's going to be free open trade and passage by the Crown amongst the First Nations. Consent will be needed for settlement in First Nations territories. And the English will continue to provide presents annually to the First Nation peoples. And there will be mutual peace, friendship, and respect. And those peace, friendship, and respect peace, friendship, and respect were embedded into wampum belts. This was one of the first ones that were ever done. Anyone know what this one is? It's called a two-row wampum belt, which means these two purple lines symbolize that our people will continue to live the way we have been long into the future, and the settlers would also live their own way, but these two roads would never cross. The white bands are peace, friendship, and respect. That's what the relationship should be, but we know it hasn't been. So once this proclamation was done in 1764, runners went throughout the Great Lakes, and the runners that were charged with that responsibility were the Nipissings and the Algonquin peoples, where they took strings of wampum to all the nations that lived in the Great Lakes and said that the king and the British Crown wants to meet with the Anishinaabe peoples to let them know about all the things that I just finished sharing with you. And the first thing that they did was they entered into ceremony. They entered into ceremony to see whether or not this was a trap, whether or not they were being called into war, and whether or not they should go. So they used what was given to our peoples, the pipe, the tobacco, and they entered into ceremony and sought out those answers. And they went to Niagara along with 2,000 other Anishinaabe that represented the 24 different nations in the Great Lakes territories. And it was through those discussions that the British Crown, they exchanged wampum again, So they exchanged wampum with the Anishinaabe peoples. And what's really interesting about this 24 nations belt, and there's others that are more eloquent in being able to explain all the teachings of these belts. But what's very interesting about these belts is that the Odawa peoples were the ones that were asked to keep these belts. And there's some individuals who resided here in our community that kept these belts. And the last one that I know of, that we know of, that had these original belts, the last family member that held them was a Tawadwa, or Lewis. There was others, Mokamadish, Signac. There's a few others that carried these belts that were responsible for telling all the promises of why these were given to our people. So I'd encourage you to continue talking to your family members and learn about those kinds of stories. And it's through ceremony that when these treaties were Niagara Treaty was taking place, we know it was the highest form of diplomacy. Not only then, but also in any of the other treaties that have happened with the Anishinaabe peoples right across the lands that we call Canada. Because we know that the pipe here on the right is a pipe that was given to the Governor General in 1836 by our peoples. And it's a pipe that was smoked at that gathering. The gathering that took place here that said the Anishinaabe peoples that resided on Manitoulin would forever continue to live on the island free from settler encroachment and continue to live their life as in the manner that they have. And the first thing that had happened at these gatherings was that every year they would get together, and whoever was responsible for the wampum belts would continue to share all the promises that were shared with the Anishinaabe peoples. And that's how they transferred knowledge. They came together every year, specifically to outline what they were promised, and they were always met by the British Crown on those occasions. And as part of the 1836 agreement, as I said, they agreed that we would allow or be allowed to continue to live here on Manitoulin, free from encroachment or interference. And it's something that, as I said, we continue to pursue, both in the courts and through negotiation, to ensure that we get all the lands back that never should have been taken away from our peoples. And I'm just sharing a quick picture here. This is probably, if you recognize a little bit of it, this is where they were gathered, is likely closer to where the arena is. Pretty cool, eh?
So that's
You can see where the church is up on the hill. It's a very old picture. And I'm going to slide right into, I know we don't have too much time, and I want to leave it open for some questions. But I want to talk a little bit about the Robinson-Huron Treaty, and I thank the folks for inviting me to come and share with our own students here at Wassiavan High School. So I thank you, Cheryl and the team, Earl at Wami Namagiagan. That the Robinson-Huron Treaty comes from individuals that were seeking out copper and forestry, timber resources on the north shore of Lake Huron. One of the things, if any of you have traveled, I know we haven't traveled in almost 2 years now, but if you ever take a look at a town on the North Shore called Bruce Mines, it has a sign over there that says incorporated in 1849. And I know that there was a treaty in 1850, so something was happening. So these towns were popping up. There was mining activity happening. And our people always protected our territories, our homelands. There was no Canadian Army back then. It was the Anishinaabe peoples that were protecting the territories. And there was another mine that popped up in Lake Superior, just north of Balting, Sault Ste. Marie, at a place called Mica Bay. And they were looking for copper. And some of the chiefs in the area, because the chiefs, like myself, we control or are responsible for certain areas. And the chiefs around the Balting area went with their boat, and they went to this place called Mica Bay, where there was an illegal mining activity happening. And in their boat, you know what they had? They had a cannon. So they took their own warship with the cannon, they aimed it at the mine shaft and told the miners that they need to leave. They have no authority, they have no permission to be mining in that area. So they left, they went back to Montreal, and they told on the Anishinaabe peoples. They said this is what they were doing. So what had happened is they sent some people to do an inquiry. It's called the Vidal, two people, Vidal and Anderson. They generated a report that showed the territories, who the people were that were living in areas, and they laid the groundwork for establishing the 1850 treaty. So the Anishinaabe peoples got together on September the 9th in 1850 at Balting, and they finally agreed with William Benjamin Robinson about a treaty for the North Shore of Lake Huron and the territory, which would allow for settlement to happen, mining and timbering activity, with a very specific clause that was included, which was the Anishinaabe peoples wanted to ensure that if they were agreeing to allow settlement and economic activity to happen, they wanted to have a share in those resources. So they call that within the agreement an annuity. So something you would get a payment every year. And it's it is the thing that I talk about here about this making things right. Because things haven't been right. The last time there was an increase to the annuity, it went up to $4, and that was in 1874. So there's some of you here that when you turn 18, you'll be able to collect your $4 a year. And we hope that in the near future that perhaps a lot higher than that. Because $4 back in 1874 could have bought a lot more things. I can't even buy a coffee for that much now. And you know what's really interesting about making things right? In August of 2012, the chiefs, the Robinson-Huron Treaty chiefs, the signatories, as well as the trustees, they gathered right here. And the decision that they made was to make things right. Meaning they had to take the crown to the court. So that's a little bit of a history here for yourselves, is that gathering took place right here in 2012, almost 10 years ago. And strategic approaches, some of the things that we've been doing, obviously, is, as I said, we've taken the crown to court. And this is on the right-hand side was a brief meeting that we had with the legal councils of both Canada and Ontario, trying to map out how the court process is going to work. And ultimately, we settled on a staged approach. So we've done a stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and we're still going through those stages. And on the left, that was last week, still working on your behalf, trying to make sure that Ontario, as a representative of the Crown, lives up to the promises that it said to our Anishinaabe peoples. I think he said he liked me too. So as I said, there's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And ultimately, we're hoping for a resolution very shortly. And in fact, you're probably going to hear something in the news tomorrow. And we're hoping that the work that we've been doing, not only since 1874, but since 2012, since the chiefs gathered here at the high school, is that we're going to get another positive decision from the court saying that the Crown needs to live up to its promises.
Wait, you're talking about the Queen.
What? No, what's that? Yeah. Yeah, the Queen, yeah. The Queen is still the legal representative of Canada. Although some say she may be symbolic, it is who our people had the relationship with as a nation. And I know I'm getting close to time here, but I do want to share a little bit about what else we need to know. Is that the 1850 treaty itself continues to protect and recognize rights that we already possessed. Meaning that the Crown didn't give us anything. In fact, we were the ones that gave them rights to be able to live upon these lands that we call treaty lands. So that's one thing that we all need to remember. As part of all of these, what our ancestors were thinking, so we got up on top here, we got Tecumseh, one of our old leaders here, Mokomanish, and we have on the bottom left here is much of our World War veterans. Yeah, your grandpa. Yeah. Your grandpa, my grandpa's in there. So these guys fought to protect our territory. They fought with an ally, the British Crown. They were fighting under that flag. And they ended up going to Oka to remind Canada that they were allies but they were also prepared to protect their Anishinaabe brothers and sisters. That's how strongly they believed in that. And the bottom right picture is from December of 2018 at a press conference in Sudbury where we were announcing that the Court of Ontario, Superior Court of Ontario, agreed with the Anishinaabe peoples that the 1850 treaty and the annuity provision, the annuity clause, is something that requires justice. And when we say that, the Crown at some point needs to acknowledge the relationships of not only those that signed the Robinson-Huron Treaty, but also the agreements with our own community, the Wikwemko, and understand our people's long and historical search for justice. And only when justice is achieved will reconciliation be attained. So there was a couple of questions that were asked previously, so I'll leave it at there because my time's coming to an end. Okay. So one of the questions that was sent in was, how does it feel to be a chief today of the Robinson-Huron Treaty, as you weren't the one who signed back in 1850? So how I feel, it is an honor, and I'm very privileged to be able to continue and carry out the work of our ancestors to ensure that you, as well as all of our families, will be able to live a good life in this territory. It is very tough work. Sometimes it's very long, and it requires a lot of patience. Because a lot of times we don't have a willing partner to be able to make sure that we correct the wrongs of history and correct the wrong approaches by the Crown and the governments. So it's up to all of us to continue supporting the chiefs that are leading the efforts against the Crown right now. Second question is, why is it important to learn about the treaty? And why do some band members get it? So why is it important? It's important because this is the foundation of our relationship with settlers that live in our homelands. We need to make sure that they're aware, that they acknowledge that they are also treaty people. And I'm assuming that why do some band members get it, is maybe referring to the annuity, is that with our membership, our population here in Wikwemko, our total membership is roughly about 8,200 members that live not only here in the community but outside. And out of that 8,200, there are 5,800 that receive the Robinson-Huron Treaty annuity payment. The thing about that though is, it isn't our own people that control who receives benefits from the treaty. There's individuals here, they're not in high school anymore. They used to be a few years ago. They're sisters. Based on how they were registered under the Indian Act, one was registered under their father, one was registered under their mother. One of them received $4, the other one didn't. Yet, same parents. And that could be said too about even myself, where my father wasn't the recipient of a $4 annuity, but my mother is. I was registered under my mother's name through the band membership of the Indian Act. So I'm eligible for a $4 payment. So these are the things that are still need to be corrected and worked on by our own people. But what could be said is that we are all beneficiaries of the treaty. And what's happening in the future? What do we have to look forward to? Well, the future is going to be determined by yourselves. You need to make a decision on how you're going to continue to live up to the values and principles of your ancestors, with the guidance from your parents, your grandparents, your aunties, uncles. And that's how we're going to make the future that we want to see. Each of us have an individual responsibility to ensure that we live the best quality of life possible. But only you can do that. And the more of us doing that, more of us making better decisions, good decisions, well thought out decisions, the better our community is going to be. So thank you, Wassiavan High School students, staff, miigwech to their education director and principal, Harold Fox, and most importantly to all of you, the students, for being very attentive and listening, and to all those listening who can't see me, miigwech for your time and your patience. And I'll leave it there.